Welcome to Educate, Inform, and Challenge. My name is Teresa MacLennan, and I'm the Executive Director of the Women and Children's Shelter of Barrie. We are so thankful that you are here with us today. Before we begin, we do want to thank our Indigenous community and partners for allowing us to share in this space to have these conversations. We truly thank you for that history and for really supporting us to share and have these conversations. The goal of our program is to talk about the lives and experiences of women. We talk about gender-based violence, human trafficking, the role of women in politics, leadership, decision-making, and business. And so we're just very, very thankful that you come along this journey with us as we have these conversations. And we really do aim to educate, inform, and challenge our thinking and what we believe to be true. So thank you for being with us. I am thrilled to welcome my guest today, Charmaine Nolan. Charmaine, welcome.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you for having me.
Great. I know, Charmaine, that you wear many, many hats in this community, and so maybe just help us to get to know you more personally, professionally. What would you like our viewers to know about you?
Thanks. Well, professionally, I'm the Justice Program Manager at the Barrie Native Friendship Center, and I've been there going on 7 years. And our role in the Justice team is to assist anyone who self-identifies as Indigenous, so First Nations, Métis, or Inuit, that is charged with a criminal offense or with a provincial offense. So we have various programs. So we have our Indigenous Bail Supervision Program, our Restorative Justice Program, Family and Criminal Court Work, and most recently we've just added a Mental Health Peer Coordinator position. So I think that you may or may not be aware that Indigenous people are just grossly overrepresented within the criminal justice system, and each of our roles is to assist individuals that are either residents of our community or may just be passing through Simcoe County and find themselves involved with the criminal justice system.
So that is a great introduction and such valuable work in our community. And so what I know about you, and a big part of our conversation today, is going to be about your own personal journey of learning, growth, exploration into your own Indigenous history, culture. So I really just kind of want to open the floor to that because it's such an interesting experience that you have. Where do you want to start us off in that at the beginning, and that's led you to the place that you are now with the understanding you have about your own history and culture?
Well, I think that I can kind of go back to the beginning, and that's that. So I was born. There's my brother and I, and both of our parents were adopted. And we went through life had a wonderful life. We had most of our childhood in the Flamborough area, then moved to Barrie later in late high school. And, I was always had an affinity or an interest in Indigenous culture. It really didn't come to light until when I was 35, both of my parents passed away. And they were both, my mom had ovarian cancer, and then my dad passed away 4 months later from a heart attack and, likely a broken heart. And it was at that time that my brother and I both really sat there and thought, oh my goodness, I'm 35 years old and where do I come from? Didn't know anything about the biological background of our family. So there was some things that happened simultaneously that I began to embark on this journey of trying to find out where my lineage was from. So it took a lot of work because my mom was not a formal adoption. And that was where we had a sense that that might be where some Indigenous lineage might come from.
So I want to make sure that, I'm understanding, so our viewers are understanding too. So both of your parents were adopted, but you weren't adopted.
Correct.
But your parents, did they know where they came from?
No, nothing.
Nothing. And so they didn't start any of that journey of looking into that or anything?
No.
Okay, so you find yourself, sadly, both parents have passed away, and you're asking yourself the question, did you always have a sense that there was an Indigenous connection for you?
I think that we did have a sense that there was, but it was nothing that was researched, and particularly because it was on my mom's side, that there was nothing to research, because it wasn't a formal adoption, and she was literally handed off to a person in Kamloops, British Columbia. So the journey began, and then so I guess simultaneous to that is that I had been working in human resource management for about 20 years, and had a wonderful career, but it was coming to an end. I was dealing with some difficult situations with downsizing, etc. And my husband and I made the decision that, I needed a break. And so I was very fortunate to be able to take a break. And when I did, I thought, what is my next step? I looked back on my experience, and I went to school to be a law clerk and certainly had a passion for law. So I started going down to the courthouse and just hanging out and meeting people and thinking, I wonder if I can fit in my next career in doing something with the law. And I was fortunate enough to meet the court worker at the time for the Barrie Native Friendship Center and began volunteering with her. So at the same time, I was starting to research and rode away to BC Vital Statistics to try to find out anything that we could about my mom's biological family. And after some time, we did receive information. And it took a lot of research to find family, but one day I had a name. I came up with a name, and I used Canada 411, and I found this person who turns out would be my Uncle Fred, and said, hi, this is going to be out of left field. And he confirmed that yes, in fact, he was aware of who my mom was. And then most significant is that he said, your grandmother is still alive. So my mom's biological mother was still alive.
Okay, so let's dive into that and unpack that a little bit more. So you find these creative ways to find out, the background for your mom, to start there. And so what was her Indigenous culture history?
So my mom was never aware of who she was.
Okay.
And at this point, I wasn't either. So it wasn't until we made the connection, and going through Ancestry.ca, etc., I was able to look into some of the family names and realize that we did have ancestors that were from Lillooet, British Columbia. So that was our first clue, and things just started to really fall into place. It's such an exciting time to know that our biological grandmother was alive, and 2 weeks later my brother and I were on a plane to Kamloops, British Columbia, and met our extended family.
So you first reached out to an uncle.
Yes.
What was the response? Was there a feeling from him as from shock, or almost like we've been waiting?
That's a good question. I think that it was a mixture of both. I think that he was very excited to share this news with the family, and very excited he was our conduit, I guess, in the introduction to our extended family.
And was that your mother's brother?
It would be my mother's uncle.
Your mother's uncle, so your great uncle.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
And he was the introduction to the family, and once we got out to Kamloops and met our grandmother, we then met my mom's 10 other siblings.
So your aunts and uncles.
Correct.
Wow. I mean, what an incredible whirlwind of discovery about who you are, who your brother is, and who your mom was.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we're going to unpack this quite a bit more, because it is an interesting journey and experience that you've had. And I'm curious to know whether or not that would be a familiar or a usual story maybe for some folks who are Indigenous, not knowing relatives, family members, things like that, right? I think better now than how it used to be, years ago, if we talk about residential schools and bring all that into it. But it is such an intriguing story that I think is so important to tell. So stay with us, and we're going to continue this conversation with Charmaine, and we just really hope that you'll come along this journey with us both. We will be right back. Welcome back to Educate, Inform, and Challenge. We are having this great conversation with my friend Charmaine Nolan, and we're talking about her own really personal journey of discovering what her Indigenous heritage and culture and history is. And so we're just so thankful that you've come along this journey with us. And so welcome back, Charmaine. So we just left off talking about you flew out to BC, you met extended family, your grandmother, and just talk to us a little bit about how that experience was to meet your biological family.
It was unbelievable. It's really indescribable, and I think that I didn't realize the importance of knowing where you came from, because I had a wonderful life. I had a great childhood and just lots of family support. But I didn't know that piece was missing until I was able to make that connection and, look at my grandmother, see my mom in my grandmother, see my mom in my aunts, and make that connection.
I'm in awe of your experience because I just think it's so incredible, and I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy for you, and I just think how your life is expanded is probably not even the right word, but just fuller, richer, because now you just know so much about your family, right? How have you integrated now what you've learned into your life now?
That's a good question, because I think that it's a journey. It's a lifelong journey. So it was a starting point, and it was, okay, here we are. I've met these wonderful extended family that, obviously there's a great distance between us, but we're in contact over Facebook, and obviously my brother has gone out more often than I have, but I'm certainly, they're always in my thoughts, and I'm just so sorry that my mom didn't get the opportunity to meet her family, but I really have taken it to heart that I'm on a learning journey, and that ties into my work as well, because I was never brought up, of course, with any kind of culture, and I'm working for the Barrie Native Friendship Center, and it's a lot. It's a lot to learn. It can feel very intimidating, and it's just really step by step. I love what I do because I learn every day. I have a sense of curiosity about just asking questions and learning, and so that I can share that with my own family and my nieces and my nephews and my stepchildren. It's been wonderful.
Did you learn more about the reasons behind why your mother in particular was adopted?
I did, and they were very personal. It was a personal consideration, which, I completely respect that my grandmother made at that time. And I think that it's a good news story that my mom had a beautiful life, and we're able to sort of come around full circle and be able to make those connections that she wasn't able to.
So I want to know, and I think this is just going to be such great learning for myself always and for our community. So your experience, the experience of your mother, the experience of your grandmother, extended family, is that experience, and I don't want to say common, but is there some commonalities for Indigenous people where breakup of family has happened from a historical perspective? And I don't feel like the words are coming out right for me, but maybe just I want to try and really highlight whether or not there is a common experience here that can happen for Indigenous folks. What do you think and feel about that?
Yes, I think definitely. I know myself as I began doing my own education, I'm embarrassed to say that I really didn't know much about colonization and the effects of colonization on Indigenous people. We weren't taught in school, but that's a poor excuse. That it was much later in life, as I'm on this journey, that I began to educate myself about the history of residential school and 60s scoop, and now the term is millennial scoop, that this is continuing within our communities. So if I relate that back to the work that I do, 100%, I see this every single day. I'm working in an urban environment, so although there are First Nations reserves that are certainly around our geography, we have a high percentage of individuals passing through or are living in our urban environment. And what really strikes me is the amount of people that have their own displacement stories. And whether it's from adoption, whether it's from family breakdown, whether it's from child welfare involvement, we just consistently hear these things, hear these stories. And then, in the work that I do within the criminal justice system, is sadly I get to see how that systemic issues carry down from generation to generation, and that it can be so difficult for someone to crawl out, to find their way out. They may not know how to find their own identity. They don't have the tools. We're dealing with lots of poverty and homelessness and just overall trauma.
There's a real intersection for me, and that's the word that comes to mind. An intersection about, education, an intersection of wealth or lack thereof. But when I think about the Indigenous community, I think about that historical oppression, systemic oppression that for so long has impacted the Indigenous community. And the results that we see of that historical oppression has created this very, very unfortunate systems now that the Indigenous folks have to try and maneuver through. And I think about the work that you do in the justice system, because I'm going to say with what I think to be sure is that you're supporting Indigenous folks, that oppression and part of their history is a part of their reality today. that it is not something that may have happened generations before, or it may have happened generations before, but they carry it themselves today. And how do we as community be allies and support and change that so that those systemic oppressions are not happening today? And what do we do to change that? And so, and I know that that is a big piece of the work that you do. But how do you do that, right? How do we become allies? How do we work together so that we have a respect of Indigenous culture and history that we embrace and we celebrate, and we don't forget the wrongs that have happened that unfortunately still continue to happen? And I feel like I said a lot of words there, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, you really nailed it, Teresa. I think that, I guess first off, from the work I do, I find it really important. It's important to me to create relationships, and it's to create relationships not only within our own Indigenous community, so I can continue my own learning and can offer supports that may be appropriate for the individuals I deal with. But also it is to create those relationships with, we call them mainstream organizations. And that would be, working with other agencies, because I think that we're all dealing with a population that is dealing with a lot right now. We're overall dealing with a lot of poverty and homelessness and the toxic drug supply, and not to mention what we're dealing with the pandemic. So put that on top of, all of the challenges that people are facing. And so working with agencies to raise awareness of some of the systemic factors that some of our population that we may all be interacting with. And then I think taking that further to more of the systems that we need to navigate that have really been a product of colonization. So the court system, the police force. So I take it very seriously, and I'm passionate about, using my relationships within the criminal justice system. So providing education to the crowns, the judiciary, to duty council, and then as well reaching out to police forces to have really open dialogue about maybe some of the way that they're conducting interactions within our community, and potential opportunities for their own education, as well as collaborating in a positive way. Because, and the one part that I didn't mention earlier is that although I deal with individuals that have charges, a large part of what I deal with too is victims and survivors of intimate partner violence, of human trafficking. And I've really seen a positive conduit of working with police forces within our area, particularly on the human trafficking side, because sadly, there's so much, and Indigenous women and girls are so at risk of being trafficked. And so it's creating those partnerships with officers, and now we have dedicated anti-human trafficking teams and all of those sorts of things. So, being available to be a resource as well, and that kind of ties back into what I do personally, because, my job, I have a job from sort of, 8 to 5, but then there's the on-calls, and that's really, it's my passion to be available to anyone that is needing assistance. And as I mentioned earlier, we have some times where people will be coming through our city that may not be from here and be a long way from home, and working with helping them and getting to them to where they need to be safe.
So we started off talking about your own personal story and journey. How has that impacted the work that you do, or has it? But does it have a different special meaning to you now, the work that you do, knowing so much more about your own personal Indigenous history?
Yes, I think, you know, I just love what I do. I love my job. I worked 20 years in corporate world, and I tell you, it's working in any kind of nonprofit is just such, everybody deserves a medal, in my opinion. All agency workers deserve a medal because so many people go above and beyond. And absolutely, I look at myself and think, you know, I have my own story, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to sit here in this chair. But there might have been one change in my life, and my story would be much different. So I really take seriously meeting every single person that I deal with, and giving respect and space to listen, and to, you know, let them drive what it is that they want to do.
Because I could imagine, just thinking about what you just said, that interaction and that conversation and the support they receive from you could be that turning point in their life, right? Like you talk about, you know, something could have happened different, and we all have this. Something could have happened different in my life, and I wouldn't be sitting in this chair. And I think about the importance of the work that you do, but the importance of the connection, and now the personal relation that you bring to the work that you do. It's critical. It's critical in our community. I'm curious, you know, very quickly, because our time has gone by so fast. You mentioned to talk about, you know, movement happening with the police, you know, and just how they approach and support Indigenous folks. Are you seeing a change within the court system with regards to the same thing?
I think that, you know, I this is a difficult question.
It's a big question.
It's a big question.
Yeah.
I think that in some aspects, yes. Do I think that we have a long way to go? Yes, I do. So I certainly can celebrate successes when we have them, but I have a much bigger vision, and that's a goal that I want to work towards, because I think that in general the system is broken, and that we need to look at more restorative justice type options and really take into consideration the background and the trauma, and how about the successes of what the resilience, the you know, passion for lots of people, what they have overcome in their own lives. So that's important to me. So I think that it's a work in progress.
Yeah. You know, our agency is incredibly thankful for the work that you do. We know that we can have shared clients from time to time. And of course, we support women and their children who have an experience of violence, and also human trafficking. So there's some parallels for sure. But we never endeavor to replace or come remotely close to the work that happens with the Barrie Native Friendship Center. And so we are incredibly thankful, your support, your partnership that helps us to do our work, and we consider you, of course, the experts. Thank you, Charmaine, for being just so forthcoming and open with your story today. And thank you, our wonderful community, for really coming alongside this journey. And we just really hope that this conversation has provided an education, information, and challenges our thinking. We will see you next time. Take care.